All right, Stampscapes after midnight. I thought I would try to finish this piece off. I've been super busy lately trying to troubleshoot computer issues to no avail. But I wanted to get a little stamping time in here, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I took a look at my pieces, and I had a few stamp sketches that I haven't gotten around to coloring, and I thought I would do this one right here. All right, so we have this really light barn in the background, and it's a lighter tone, okay? So I stamped it in black, but I think I stamped it off once and then stamped it in the background so that it has this kind of lighter look. And the same thing with this fence right here. I didn't want this fence to interfere with this foal right here, so this foal is stamped in black, and this is in black as well. But again, second impression, I stamped it out once, and then in the background there's just so it wouldn't interfere with the silhouette of the, I don't know, whatever the main subject matter of the scene here. So all right, so we're going to go in. This is glossy cardstock, by the way, and I'm going to be coloring mostly with dye-based inks here. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to retain this value, whatever convention from going from dark to light in the background there, okay? And that will reinforce this kind of idea of depth and atmosphere, okay? All right, so this is a really light tone right here. It's a desert sand. Any kind of like a beige color would work really good for this. Something like a, you know, any number of those distressing colors would work really well in this scenario. Just kind of a warm tone and a very light value one. Okay, so a warm tone can be like a, like a, you know, lime green or something like that. But we don't want to go in with something too hot like that in terms of intensity. So kind of on the lighter side, but it works really good in terms of a base coat like this. And it's kind of a duller color too. I mean, it can be a little bit brighter as long as it's light too. But what I'm doing here is I'm adding in some shadows underneath the horse. I'm kind of following my you know, my layout here. I stamped a lot of the rock textures underneath this horse to kind of give it texture, but also it looks like a shadow being cast by the horse right there. And as well as the foal right there too, just a little bit under there like that. Okay, so I'm going to get some light tones here on this background. I don't necessarily want this warm tone up in the sky. I can get a little of it, but I'll kind of go with a bluish tinge back in there, I think. Here, yeah, maybe I changed my mind. I'll put a little of this in the that upper area just to get a little bit of tone laid down. All right, so this is one of those little tricks you do in things like oil painting. You get this base layer color down just so that you're not painting with your main colors right over like a white neutral gesso color or something like that. And it's just a good foundation to kind of establish the rest of your color scheme on. All right, so this is in dye-based inks right here. I did pick up some of the black ink that had already been applied. You know, if you're doing like a dabbing motion, it really isn't going to pick up too much, but if you're kind of sliding like that, you might be picking up some of the ink, okay? Now this has been allowed to dry for a while, but there's still, you know, some residual ink. It's not necessarily bad like that because you can use it to do some additional shading in here. That's more of like a pure version of that color. And this is kind of a, you know, this grayish tinged one right here. So you can add in some of those extra shadows like that through a combination of both the black, which is being wiped up from those images, and the color that you've just used, okay? So, you know, in a lot of other types of coloring, maybe you wouldn't want that type of merging and blending of the color scheme, you know, the different colors. But with this type of coloring, it's, you know, it can actually help, you know, in terms of kind of giving some visual harmony to the different colors. Okay, so I'm going to switch off, and by the way, this is just a paper towel that I'm using here. I'll go with this green, this peeled paint. It's kind of a aged looking green right here. It's kind of a bright, you know, one in comparison to something like this. So kind of apply it, no, I don't know. I wouldn't call it sparingly, but if you want to leave some areas light like that, be sure not to just go over and color it completely in there, okay? Now I'm going to leave this kind of this corral in here just like as soil, so I'm not going to bring the green in there too much. I mean, you can bring a little bit of it, but don't bring a huge amount in there. Or don't introduce a huge amount in there. Okay, so I'm getting it a little bit brighter because I do want a little bit of brightness. I kind of wrote in the description that I'm going to try to transition it from kind of diffused in the background as far as the imagery and colors to something a little bit more sharper and brighter in the foreground to push this idea, again, of visual depth. Okay, so let's go on to our next tone. I'm looking at my pads here. Let me try a little bit of this walnut stain. This walnut stain is kind of dry, so I'll see if I can get a little bit of it going here. I'm just switching off to my a clean part of my paper towel. I can switch this out. I tend to just use it to like the point where I can't use it any longer. I'd really like to use colored pencils on this one, but you know, the glossy cardstock's just not really going to take colored pencils well, so it's a little bit out of the question. Okay, so this is brown. It's quite a darker brown and richer brown than what, you know, I've already laid down, which is that desert sand. So we'll apply this somewhat sparingly. Maybe it's good that the pad was a little bit dry. But if it's not, if your pads are like super juicy, what you do is you just take this, blot it off a little bit before you take it on there. Okay. You don't have to use a paper towel either. It could be, you know, you could use, you know, whatever tool you use to apply your inks with, sponges or, you know, I don't know, any type of those tools. I find that paper towels work pretty decently. They're, you know, they're meant to absorb, so they grab and, you know, it takes the ink really well because it's, you know, paper towels are designed to absorb moisture for the most part. You know, what people are using it for. So if they can absorb, they can transfer that moisture down really well. Hello, Barry. Good to see you. How are you? What time is it out your way? It's early morning, right? All right, there we go, like that. See this right here? I'm retaining these little areas of light in these spaces, okay? And that's what you do. You kind of vary your light a little bit in each region. 9:30 a.m. I couldn't remember if it was like before your breakfast area or after. But I remember you when I came on like pretty late at night. I don't know, I forgot what time you take off. or something like that, or that last time you were on. But good to see you. All right, so this area up here is going to be, you know, an area of light up there too, in this whole field like that. Oh, you're on vacation. Sounds good. How's the weather out your way? Are you in a heat wave as well? Seems like everyone's in a heat wave. I don't know if that was around the world or just, you know, out here like in North America. All right, there we go like that. So this area right in here is like grass. We have dark and light. Right in here, whatever, dirt, dark and light like that. A little bit of dark and light like outside of the fence there, but that's going to be this area of like fog and mist, morning mist in the background. So I'll make this kind of a bluish tinge up there. Oh yeah, I forgot I was going to do something. Gray. I don't use gray too often. But when I do, sometimes I'm thinking, I need to use that more often, but sometimes I kind of forgot. Okay, you had a heat wave there, stopped yesterday. Oh, okay. Yeah, you are. It's like we're all kind of experiencing we're not too bad here in Southern California, but it is getting hotter. In June, they call this thing called June gloom. And that's where it's usually kind of overcast, but that's kind of the weather we were having earlier this month. Well, maybe, I don't know, was it up until last week? Okay, here comes this gray here. And it doesn't have to be this gray. This is just London fog. You can use any kind of gray. I would have typically put that down before maybe this darker tone, but let's just kind of add that into the mix. It kind of, I don't know what the word is. It doesn't neutralize the color scheme, but it kind of mutes the, maybe some of the brightness, but being that it's, when you're laying it down over a lot of areas, it can also be almost an invisible layer that kind of unifies it. So you see that tone up there, and see how I'm adding it right down in here? I have a little down here. It feels like the colors, especially when you're using like different colors for different areas or objects, having kind of a, a few foundation colors, even though they might not be very visible, can unify them. Okay, so I'm adding it down here in this grass as well. We have it in the dirt. It's over my barn and sky area. So, yeah, a little bit of a, so it's kind of like blending things together from a visual sense. It's not physically blending, but it's kind of optically blending like that. And that's another thing that those kind of universal tones do. I call that first color with desert sand a base layer, but in a sense, this is kind of a base layer, even though I'm putting it over the tops of ones. It's a really light tone that's something in common with all these different areas. I feel that the piece is kind of starting to glow a little bit more too. So with something like this too, it's important that if you're going to maintain some of the lighter areas, don't just tone them all out. It'll kind of mute it. It'll have a different look if you wanted to do that though, but I want to add in some white pigment ink in here later, so it's kind of important to retain at least a little bit of that white. In this case, it represents lighting in here, but it's really the white of the page. All right, let's get to our last tone. I'm just going to go with a really light blue here. So you're having it must have been, if you're having an easier time breathing today, it must have been a little bit humid there too, huh? It's like a moist heat there. Yeah. So see that right there? Just stamping it out in kind of a lighter tone gives it that whole kind of mood to it. It represents like moisture in the air. And then when the light reflects off that and gets back to our eye, it's going through all that suspended moisture in the air. So, yeah, it gives it a different feel, doesn't it? Rather than that if that wasn't black. Now, if we stamp it in black, sometimes it gives us a little bit more opportunity for different coloring styles, but I think the mood is stronger with something like this. All right, so this blue, I'm just going down here a little bit. You don't need to use this over the whole thing. I mean, you can, But, well, maybe I will. Here, let me see how that looks. This blue right here is a fairly light blue. And then blue relates to green, of course, so you can add it in over the top of the green. It's not going to make the green look blue or something like that. It'll just give it a little bit of a different tinge of color, especially if you've colored in a lot of that area already. If I retained a lot more white down here, then of course that area would look blue because you're hitting it with the blue, but not too much. All right. Let me grab another green here. Here's a jungle green. I'm just gonna use it on my gray and blue, whatever, ink applicator here. The good thing about my ink applicators is you can get these anywhere in the world, right? Or it can even get hers right at any local store. I used to use the color box stylus tools a lot, and it was like, not a lot of people use those for ink applicators, and sometimes I'd use them in these videos, and places, people around the world. This color box stylus tool was really popular like 30 years ago or something like that, with color box having them out there and a lot of people buying them, but a lot of people didn't use them for the intended purpose. Hey, that jungle green looks really good down there. It's making this area look much richer and more, whatever, vibrant. So you get something nice and rich and vibrant here, a little bit less so here, and less so up there. So this is like a dull color. It's more like pastels up there, okay? It can be rich, but it's not intense. So you go in bright, medium, dull that way. And you're also going kind of from darker, lighter up there, okay? Mostly in terms of the coloring. I mean, if we had like a dark, I don't know, tiny horse back there or something just to stand out against the barn, that's not any big deal. But just for the most part, the richness of the coloring gets brighter to dull like that. Okay, it also just happens to be a little bit darker to lighter like that, but it's mostly the intensity I'm talking about. And that would, kind of lend itself to kind of this misty morning type of thing. All right, let me see if I can go a little bit brighter here. I don't want to go like too intense. I don't want to go with this. That's like a super bright green. But maybe this one right here, we can add a little down here in the shadows maybe. It's not going to make the shadows lighter, but it can make them brighter in terms of intensity. You've got the styluses out there, Barry. Oh, yeah. So you know that people use that craft foam. If your tips ever wear out, you can, I don't know, do you know how to replace those tips? I'm trying to remember. So some people told me they use different types of glue or different types of double stick tape or something like that. And I think the foam they said they used was crafter's foam or something like that. So they just cut it out in the shape of that tip. So if that tip ever wears out or tears, don't throw away that little plastic nib part and just replace the foam. And I think people replace the foam no problem. I forgot the foam they were using though. I thought it was one of like the Ranger foams or something like that. But as long as it's like a decent, fairly dense foam, I think it would work really well. All right, now I'm looking at that now. My grass is really getting kind of rich up there. I'm starting to wonder if I should make this brown in here, at least the near brown, a little bit richer. Maybe. Let's go back to this walnut stain right here. I tell you what, I'll mix that walnut stain with a little bit of this green here and see how that goes. Yeah, it looks okay, I think. It's a little bit brighter of a brown right there. Okay. And again, I want it kind of, I don't know if I want it that dull. Let me just put a little streak across here like this. Okay, so see, I just added that little streak like that. So it's a little brighter right there, but it's a little bit duller on both sides of it. So what I did was I just did one of these types of things. Like right, you know, like that way, right down in there. So it's just not so dull in there. Not dull in terms of interest, but dull in terms of intensity. So, and let's do a little bit underneath the horse here. So, one of my teachers, our teachers mentioned that some of the brightest colors are really in the shadow areas where it's not getting kind of washed out with the lighting in there. Okay, let's do this right here. I think that works pretty good. And again, it's just using that same walnut stain. I just applied a thicker coat of it like that. All right, now I'm looking right here. That, that doesn't really... I'm not going to have like this bunch of mist kind of rising from that little area. So I think I'm going to put a little bit of this blue right in there too. It's not going to represent like water or anything like that, but I just want a little tinge of some color in that area. Yeah. My stylus tips, I use them for, I don't know, some of those, I'm sure I used them for 20 years. And a lot of the ones that I was using, I used in workshops as well. So it was getting like handled by a lot of people. But I always just taught them how to use them in the beginning of the class and how to use a lot of ink with it and how they just wouldn't tear. And then I started using the re-inkers, it was typically the seashells or Adirondack lights, and we used it as our first color on those tips. If anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, the stylus tools are this wand, and it had these tips that you clip into the handle, and it made for a really great sponge applicator for ink coloring, dye-based ink coloring. I guess you can do a little bit with like pigment inks as well or something like that, but mostly it was dye-based inks that people were using them for, not something like alcohol inks. But anyways, they were foam, so the foam could be prone over time to cracking or something like that, or if people used them too roughly, they could potentially tear because they're just foam. But if you take care of them, they really lasted a long time. Decades with heavy use too. But anyways, they're not being made anymore. I guess the company went out of business, and now it's been quite a few years. But I don't know, sometimes you can still find some out there. I've come across some I'm grabbing some pens right now. You can still find some out there once in a while, like on eBay or something like that. Someone will be selling a set or selling some tips or something like that, but it was made by Clear Snap, which was really a fantastic company, and that's one of those companies that I don't like it when we lose any company of any type, but they were really an innovator and provider of specific tools for the industry. A lot of companies just kind of repurpose materials from other industries, the art industry, or like the makeup industry with those, those makeup brush applicators or something like that. But ClearSnap made tools specific for the purpose that were intended for, like the stylus tools. Now I say that, but those ones were really meant to be stamps, but it worked perfect for an ink applicator, and they started using them that way after they saw me using them at this convention, because I went to a show afterwards and I saw at their make and take table they were adding ink using those tools, but They were really fantastic and super ergonomic and contoured to the hand really nicely. Okay, I was looking for my other green. Here we go. So I have a range of greens right here. And if you'll notice, these are kind of the same colors that I used in ink form down here. So kind of a beigeish color with a couple different greens down here. And I can add in some lighting and like textured lighting down here. And we can do the same thing up in this area right here. This area right in here, it's kind of dull looking. Not very exciting in terms of a texture goes. And there's not a whole lot going on there with color either. So we can add in some nice textures in here. And then the white pigment is really going to bring this whole thing to life too. So that's going to really give it the atmosphere. Okay, now that being said, before I do some of that, let me add in some additional coloring on this barn. I don't want to go too dark because it's supposed to be very light. So this is just a really light beige right here. It just didn't have too much dimension. Okay. Let me try this right here. I'll just go underneath the eaves a little bit, like that. So that's one good thing about the alcohol pens is they come in so many different, like a big range of different values. All right, so see that's getting a little bit of tone laid down here. If this was on a semi-gloss paper, I'd probably be doing this with colored pencils. But I don't know. The alcohol ink works really good there too. You can do alcohol ink, applications too. I kind of took care of most of the things in here, but if you want to add a little bit of extra kind of shadow work in a very specific area, you can do it with the pens. It's easier to do it than with a wadded up, paper towel. And the alcohol inks won't interfere with the applications of the dye-based inks either because, alcohol and water don't mix. Here's a... maybe that's a little bit too bright. I'm too chicken to use that right now. Here's a little bit of a duller one. I can add it right down here at the base of the posts or something like that. Maybe here in the foreground. Like that. I don't want to get it too dark. It's getting darker and darker, but I'm trying to, have this mostly kind of in the shadow areas like that for a little bit of depth. Okay, so see these things, I just added a little bit at the base of these posts. So it feels like the fence is a little bit more anchored into the scene like that, I think. All right, so I don't know if this one's going to show up at all, but let's give it a try. Paper towels and cotton balls and Q-tips or cotton swabs. It's like our household, whatever, scene creating applicators found right in your own home. When those stylus tools, okay, I hated those things going out of, business because I thought they were the best color applicators that ever, will be, because no company is going to come out with an ink applicator at this point in time. The molding process, to make those types of things, and the research and development, But when they did close down, I was like, all right, it's always kind of bothered me that, people around the world, those tools just weren't readily available. Okay, now I'm adding these little textures down right in here. Now this one's a really dark pen in comparison to how dark this is. So it's roughly the same value of darkness. Okay, that's why it's not showing up too much. But I like to get a little bit of that down first. So it's like, you know, a medium tone green applied over a medium tone background, okay? But I like to get a little of that down first, just to kind of get in the swing of it and figure out where I'm going to add it. And then I start adding in the lighter ones as I go. These ones are going to stand out more because they're going to have more contrast against that background in there. Unless I add it right in that light area, then it's going to be light on light, but light on medium or light on dark is really going to stand out. So, okay, so that one's done right there. Now, I used to just do this all with one pen. It was just white, okay? But there's so many more colors available now that in sets and inexpensive ones, so I really try to make use of whatever that availability in there. So see, that's area right in here. It's starting to really come to life like this. And what I'm doing is I'm putting it on top of the grassy little clusters. Okay, you don't have to stay. You know, it's not. You don't have to be on there perfectly. Like right in here. Okay, so I'm adding it right on the top sides of this. See how this is like a little tuft of grass, and then there's shadow. And right up here, or right down here, it's like right around in here that I'm adding it, okay? Right where that kind of area of light meets some of that darkness, okay? But again, it's not like, oh my God, I missed that, you know, spot by whatever, 2 millimeters or something like that. It's not that important, okay? But just in general. Okay, so see that like that. It's kind of fun. And we'll go to this lighter one. I think it's lighter. And the lighter you go, kind of, I do less applications of it because it's lighter and it's going to stand out more. All right, so that should be it down there. See, it's kind of like it really area is just really brought to life like that. And this is kind of a beige color. You can go to white too. Hello, Jennifer. Yeah, yeah. It's midnight stamping here. If you were trying to sleep and you couldn't sleep and got up and, yeah, watch this. I'll put you to sleep in like 10 minutes, no problem. You're gonna, when you fall asleep, when you do, you're gonna have a dream of like dots everywhere, you know, or nightmare. All right, but see that right there? Then it's representing kind of like lighting or dew on the grass or something like that. But what that really is you can add that type of thing to any area, and it adds texture and lighting and just kind of sparkle to an area. All right. Now that can be done on like anything. Like if you're stamping out like a word stamp or something like that, you're thinking, what the heck? What are you talking about, word stamp? You know? But like if it was like letter forms or something like that, like if it's cursive or something like that, you can put a few little dots on the tops of some of the like the ascenders and descenders or something like that, and it'll look real three-dimensional. So this really kind of pops out at you. Okay, now see this area right in here, where this area is kind of light. I'll add some of these little dots down like this in here, where you can't really even see. Well, you can see them a little bit, but it's kind of a lighter area. But what I'll do is I'll kind of bring some of this out, Okay, so I'm clustering it in the lighter area where you can barely see it. And then I'm kind of bringing it out into some of these darker areas. So it's kind of like where light meets darker. Okay, it doesn't have to be like really dark or anything like that, but just darker than it. So what you're doing is you're extending out that lighting in here. It's going from light a little bit darker like that. And you're just kind of extending that out in a different way. You're doing it kind of in a different texture. Okay, so this dye-based ink has a little bit of texture, right? These little swooshes or, you know, these little smears or something like that. And you're just kind of doing the same thing with now. Yeah, you're doing it in dots like that. You can call it like stippling or something like that. It's really more highlighting here, but you kind of have a little bit of a higher concentration in there, and you kind of move it out. Now, it's looking like it's crawling with dots, though. It's like really too much, but that's where I kind of knock it back with the pigment ink that I'm going to be going to. So, but these types of things like this, it brings areas to life, I think. You know, I thought it looked okay before, but these little kind of sparkly things can really bring stuff to life. So it's like this pad right here. If I was rendering this pad right here in a drawing or painting or something like that, without this kind of highlight right here, it wouldn't look as dimensional if you kind of figured like this is going to be like the same color as right here, or you can see like my fingernails there, you know what I mean? It'd be like more pronounced if it was like manicured or something like that. But like that little line like that, you know what I mean? So this would be like a white highlight, you know, with a white pen, and like my nails would be like a dull gray. But that's where you make use of your different colored pens too, you know, like that. Oh, so look at these rungs of this fence right here. Okay, so just do like some little bit of highlights like this here, okay, like this. If you ever add too much, you can just like, oh my god, that's like way too light. You just, you know, you just wipe it off like that. Or with a paper towel or whatever. You don't want to do it with your finger. See that right there? I think that fence kind of looks a little bit more dimensional that way. Here's the fence posts right here, if you want to do that on the fence posts. Too. I usually do it on one side. I just kind of pick a side and I kind of keep it consistent. I always do it on the left or right side like that. But see how that kind of stands out a little bit more? I don't know, maybe that doesn't look too straight right there, but you know, knock that back a little bit like that. All right, so I think that is about right. Now, so we've kind of unified things through color and base layers, shadow work, and then through, you know, some little highlights like that. So there's some highlights back in here, background, midground, foreground. And again, you don't always have to do that. It just happens to be in this case. And we'll do some more textural additions here. It's lighting and unification. This lighting right here with the pens is very crisp and sharp because it's a little dot. And now we'll add in some lighting that's kind of dull and kind of diffused. It's soft. It's 4 a.m. Oh my gosh. Wait a minute. Did you fall asleep and get up, or did you just never fall asleep? Yeah. Count the dots right here. Like, you can go back and replay this, and let me see. So when you get up to about, you'll be asleep by the time you get to, you know, that like 2000 with no problem. All right, let's add this in those areas that are light, the lightest, okay, where I've retained some areas of light. And I do that first. Okay, so this, okay, now you see my tapping down on this. Something where people, if they do this for the first time, they might go like into their pad, but my pad's like practically dry, okay? And I kind of keep that one that way, my C for cotton, unless I just re-inked this. I don't think I did. But now see where I'm adding it down there, it's just getting a little bit lighter because this is like a really light version and dry version of this ink, okay? And that's the consistency you want, okay? So see, it's like that. Like even when I'm pressing into here, there's barely any ink. So you think it looks like a misty kind of application of white pigment ink, right? And that's what you want if you're trying to represent kind of light fog and mist, and you don't want to do it with a big inky slathered applicator or something like that, okay? All right, so I'm adding it back in here, and even though this barn was stamped in kind of a light, it's in black, but it's the second impression, so it's a really light one, I can make it transition even more, so it's a little bit lighter over here, a little bit darker over here, and I think that looks pretty good, I can alter it post impression with this right here, okay? So the more you lay down on there, the farther back I think it seems to look, from an optical standpoint. And again, if you ever had too much of it, you just take your clean side and just wipe it right off, and this will dry on here, but it doesn't dry so fast that you can't kind of manipulate it, especially if you're doing it on like a semi-gloss or a glossy cardstock. If it's in matte, it grabs it and dries a little bit faster because it's absorbing into the surface a little bit more, but you can really manipulate it and move it around for a little while. Oh, you were asleep and then got up. I'm sorry if I woke you up there. I send out these psychic vibes to for anyone that that might want to check this out to wake up. Okay, now see that fence right there? I'm just kind of putting some right in there. Like that, kind of entering in this misty kind of morning idea here. It's a little bit too dark in here to really look like that, but I did it so that I create a little bit more contrast in here. Okay, now it's going to, white against this darker area is really going to stand out a lot more. But I start off my kind of exercise of whatever, this pigment ink application in those lighter areas where it's not going to be as pronounced. It kind of gives me, it's a little bit of practice, before I get to my darker areas where it's being applied. Okay. Because you have to get kind of familiar with how wet your ink pad is too. I put a little bit of that over the head of this horse right here, the foal. So I just wiped it off. But okay, let's add this right down here. It's a little bit lighter right here, so I'm going to start it off right around in here. But I like it. I like this pigment ink at the base of objects, base of trees or something like that, because it looks like this low-lying fog on the ground, okay? So we'll add a little of that around. It's a little bit blobby right there, okay? Because I just re-inked it, but it also is showing up a lot more on this darker area here. So what I'll do is I'm adding it down. It's a little bit too much. So what you do is you just kind of keep tapping around there. Now I'm kind of rotating my cotton ball around to a drier side of it where there's no ink, so that's kind of removing some of it, okay? And I tend to think it looks pretty good when you kind of oscillate things, so it's a little bit over here. I don't think I want to add it over the whole front area. I don't think. Let me see. See, I'm just kind of adding it right here, but I think I'll leave this part open, okay? Or not coated. All right, so see this right in here, kind of add in a little bit more. What I want to try to do is you want to transition it a little bit from kind of a heavier, it's not an opaque application, but like a thicker application to thinner so that it kind of dissipates a little bit. So let me try to add a little bit more here. And then as it moves away from that spot, I'll try to dissipate it a little bit more. Or, just give it a nice transition tone like that. But see, this is kind of doing something like this brings in this familiar or common texture with the background, okay? For that kind of visual harmony and continuity, you have like similar textures or something like that in different areas. Repetition, like that. So see this down here? That's looking pretty good right around there. I'm kind of wiping like this a little bit, tapping to build up and then wiping a little bit for a little bit of a different application. I think this is looking pretty good. Now let's take a look at our kind of stars of the scene right here, our horses. Let's go in there and bring in that typical, foggy at the base type of touch right in here to them. And like I said, if I don't like it or if I add too much, you can just always wipe it off. But I think that looks pretty good. It just kind of varies them a little bit. Let me do something like right here. I'm going to put in a little bit of this lighting right in here because this is kind of illuminated right in here because I didn't color it in. So I'm going to put in a little bit of this on my figures, like right around in here, making it look like the light is kind of coming from the background through them like that. And maybe it's kind of nice that little foal is a little bit darker or lighter right here and darker up front. So a little bit of diffusion to more crisp like that, just like the barn is from the bottom to top like that. So now as this is drying, it's getting a little bit darker here. It becomes a little bit more see-through as that dries, which is kind of good in some ways. But you kind of build it up a little bit more to get it, to the point where you want it. Sometimes you might have to wait till it dries and it's like, oh my God, what happened to all my fog or something like that. Then you just add more at that time and just kind of build it up. And what you're doing is you're building up a thicker layer of it. And I think that should do it right in there. All right. Let's go a little bit more. I mean, kind of conservative in here, but I think it could look potentially pretty cool if I illuminate that area a little bit more. So I'm going to take a little bit more than I think is ideal, because again, it's going to dry and look a little bit duller. Or darker, I should say, not duller. All right. Okay. How are you doing, Jennifer? Are you still there? Are you getting sleepy or? See, Barry wants to wake up, Well, she's probably already waking up, but for her, it's it's in a the later morning hours, heading toward, moving towards noon. But I'll do my demonstration like, okay, let's see. Let's add on a little white here. Or how does Bob Ross talk? Okay, I'm going to add in a little bit more white pigment ink over my barn in the background. And when I get to 50 taps, you'll be absolutely asleep. Or that's hypnosis, not sleep, huh? All right. How's that look, though? In some ways, you're kind of getting rid of some of the things you've done with the inks, you know what I mean, in terms of, achieving some brightness or something like that in there, some of the little sparkly little bits or something like that. But they're still underneath there. They're just kind of muted. But I think that kind of textural type of thing in here, you know what I mean? I think it adds to it. It's just a different look. I liked it before it too, or some of it, you could have just added it in the background and left the foreground crisp too, and that would really maybe that would have pushed depth even further. But I don't know, from a little continuity and mood aspect of it, I think that having it, this little white pigment ink in here, it's like a different character in the scene. You know what I mean? When someone looks at this, they're going to look at the horses are the things that are going to get people's attention first. But I think the kind of the emotional character of the piece is the fog right in here. It sets the mood of the piece a little bit more than not. But again, it's just one of those, options that you can add in there from a technique or mood standpoint or something like that. And for me, and a lot of scenes too, where things get a little bit, sometimes things go a little bit haywire on me with coloring. I keep adding and adding and adding, and yeah, with the point of trying to create a really rich, deep surface. But sometimes, I can add so much color. It's a little bit out of focus. Sometimes I can add a little bit too much coloring and whatever in order to achieve like a deep, rich, varied tone grass area or something like that. Okay. But, the pens and the pigment ink, it always remedies it. You know what I mean? I could push and pull texture more when I get to that point in time. So it looks a little bit more three-dimensional, potentially. And I don't know. For me, it's really fun to do because I love textures as well. So, but again, I think it really sets an additional layer of mood over the piece. When you walk out, when you're walking outside in like a foggy morning or something like that, if you see that mist rising off of the ground, or you're at a body of water and it's a pond and there's mist on the, you know what I mean? It tends to have a different feel than say going out there at high noon or something like that. When those types of things aren't maybe as apparent. So anyway. You need to check out of your hotel now. Oh, you're on vacation. I thought you meant you were just at home on vacation. All right. Have a great rest of your trip there then, Very. And thanks for checking out the stream here. All right. So anyways, there's our scene here. An easy kind of finish, a little bit of transition from, I guess, cool tones down to warmer tones, and it's going from dark to light, and it's going from whatever intense to dull, and hopefully that kind of pushes depth in the scene you know, in this little whatever quarter page space right here. So lighter things in the background, darker things in the foreground, duller things in the background, brighter things in the foreground like that. So, and brought all together with common texture like that. So anyway, fun little exercise. All right. Yeah, Jennifer, hope you're able to get to sleep there. Remember, just count those dots, replay all those little dots in your mind. And when you know, if you start from the top like that and replaying it, by the time you get to right there, that's like, you know, your first stage of sleep, right? And right around in here. And then your subconscious will continue down here. And, you know, it's like fifth stage of sleep right there. With your subconscious doing the counting. All right, thanks so much for joining in. Checking, I can't even spell here at nighttime. Oh, it's 1:20 for me here. All right, everyone. Good afternoon and good night or whatever. Good morning. Hope to see you on a future vid. If you can't get to sleep, send me some psychic vibes out there, and we'll try to do another after midnight stamping piece again.